Ladies, listen to me carefully. You know, there's something incredibly powerful about a woman who chooses herself. Not in arrogance, not in defiance, but in quiet confidence. Silence is not just the absence of words, it is the presence of self-worth. When someone walks away or when you feel taken for granted, your instinct may be to fight, to explain, to prove your worth. But here's the truth. Your worth is not up for debate. Silence is not weakness, it is power. It is often misunderstood as passivity, but in reality it is one of the most strategic and impactful tools a person can wield. In a world where everyone is trying to be heard, where validation seems to come from constant communication, choosing silence is a statement in itself. It conveys confidence, strength, and an unwavering sense of self-worth. When someone walks away from you, takes you for granted, or fails to recognize your value, the natural instinct is to explain yourself, to fight for attention, to prove your importance. But true power comes from restraint. It comes from the ability to sit back and allow your absence to do the talking. Words can be debated, manipulated, or ignored, but silence? Silence forces reflection. It is the one thing that cannot be dismissed because it leaves a void that demands acknowledgement. Silence works because it disrupts expectation. When someone expects you to chase after them, to plead, to justify, and you do none of those things, they are left unsettled. They start to wonder why. What changed? Did they overestimate their importance? Did they underestimate yours? Suddenly, the balance of power shifts. Instead of you needing to explain your worth, they are now the ones trying to decipher it. This moment of uncertainty is where realization begins to set in. The most powerful people in the world understand the value of silence. Think about leaders, visionaries, or anyone who commands a room. They do not speak just to fill space. They speak when necessary, and when they do, people listen. But more importantly, they know when not to speak. They know that silence can create anticipation, that it forces people to lean in rather than pull away. This principle applies not only in leadership, but also in relationships. When you remain silent, when you choose not to engage in unnecessary conflict or validation seeking, you communicate something profound. You are secure in yourself. Imagine a scenario where someone you deeply care about begins to pull away. Maybe they stop calling as often, maybe their messages become less frequent, or maybe they begin to take your presence for granted. The immediate reaction might be to demand answers, to ask what's wrong, or to attempt to fix the situation by overcompensating with effort. But what if, instead of reacting, you simply withdrew with dignity? Not out of bitterness or to manipulate, but because you respect yourself enough not to force someone to see your value. That silence speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. When you stop engaging in situations that do not serve you, you also give yourself the gift of clarity. Silence is not just about making the other person notice your absence. It is also about giving yourself the space to observe and understand the situation for what it truly is. It allows you to step back and see whether that relationship or situation was built on genuine connection or whether it was merely a cycle of seeking and validation. Many times, when you stop talking, you realize that the only thing holding that connection together was your effort alone. And that in itself is an answer. People fear silence because they associate it with loneliness. But solitude and silence are not the same. Silence is not about isolation. It is about control. It is about knowing when to engage and when to disengage. When used intentionally, it becomes a tool of empowerment rather than a sign of defeat. It allows you to set the tone for how you are treated. If someone sees that you are willing to walk away without argument, without begging, they begin to respect you in a way they never did before, because now they see you as someone who values themselves above all else. Time and time again, you will see that silence reveals more than words ever could. It makes people confront their own emotions. It forces them to sit in their own thoughts without your influence, and in that space, they begin to understand what they may have lost. When you stop speaking, stop arguing, stop explaining, when you simply remove your presence, people notice. They start remembering the moments they took for granted. They recall your laughter, your kindness, the energy you brought into their life, and they wonder if they made a mistake. This is not about playing games or trying to manipulate emotions. It is about understanding your own power. It is about realizing that sometimes The most effective way to make someone miss you is not to convince them of your worth, but to let them feel the absence of it. And in that space of silence, truth emerges, both for them and for you. Your value is not determined by someone else's attention. This is a truth that, once embraced, changes the way you see yourself and the way you allow others to treat you. In a world that constantly pushes the idea that being wanted by others is the ultimate validation, it takes strength to recognize that your worth is not something that fluctuates based on someone else's recognition. You are valuable because of who you are, not because of who notices you. Actually, you're not valuable because of who you are, not because of who notices you. It is easy to fall into the trap of seeking validation from another person, especially when emotions are involved. When you care about someone deeply, their attention can feel like oxygen, something you crave to feel whole. But what happens when that attention fades? When they become distant, uninterested, or indifferent? Does that mean your worth has diminished? Absolutely not. It means that their perception has changed. But that has nothing to do with the reality of your value. The moment you stop chasing, you shift the power dynamic. The reason this is so powerful is that it forces you to focus on yourself rather than on someone else's approval. Think about it. When you run after someone constantly seeking their attention, their response dictates how you feel about yourself. If they give you time, you feel important. If they ignore you, you feel insignificant. But what if you refuse to play that game? What if you decided that your self-worth is non-negotiable, regardless of who chooses to see it? The truth is, people respect those who respect themselves. When you stop seeking validation from someone else, you become more attractive, not just in a superficial way, but in an energetic, undeniable way. Confidence is magnetic. A person who knows their worth and does not beg for attention stands out in a way that cannot be ignored. When you withdraw your energy from someone who took you for granted, they start to notice. It's human nature. We are wired to appreciate what we no longer have easy access to. But this is not just about making someone miss you. It's about reclaiming your own power. When you realize that you do not need someone else's approval to feel valuable, you free yourself from the emotional roller coaster of external validation. You stop living for their responses and start living for yourself, and that shift is where real self-respect begins. One of the greatest realizations you can have is that your value is constant. It does not increase when someone pays attention to you, nor does it decrease when they ignore you. You do not become less valuable just because someone fails to recognize what you bring to the table. Their blindness is not your burden. Their inability to see your worth does not mean it is not there. There is something incredibly powerful about a person who knows their own value and refuses to settle for less. It sends a message not just to the person in question, but to the universe itself. When you operate from a place of self-respect, you attract people who respect you in return. You set a standard. You make it clear that your presence is not something that can be taken lightly. This shift often makes people who once overlooked you begin to notice. When you stop seeking their attention, when you stop waiting for their recognition, they begin to wonder why. They start questioning what changed, why the dynamic feels different. That's because they can feel the energy shift. When someone who used to give endlessly suddenly pulls back, it creates a void. And in that void, the other person starts to realize the real victory is not in making them miss you. The real victory is in reaching a place where their attention is no longer something you need to feel whole. When you find yourself no longer craving their validation, you have truly won. Because that is when you have become the person who does not settle, who does not chase, who does not beg for love or attention. People will come and go. Their interests will fluctuate, but your self-worth should remain unshaken. The moment you stop tying your value to another person's attention, you become untouchable. You become someone who is chosen not because they begged for it, but because their presence is undeniable. Self-respect is your most attractive quality. It defines the way you carry yourself, the way you allow others to treat you, and ultimately the way people perceive you. It is not just about demanding respect from others. It starts with how you see yourself. When you truly respect yourself, It radiates through your actions, your choices, and your energy. People are naturally drawn to those who exude confidence and self-worth because it signals strength, independence, and an unshakable sense of identity. Many people mistakenly believe that attractiveness is about looks, charm, or even the ability to keep someone interested. But the truth is, the most captivating individuals are the ones who set high standards for themselves and refuse to compromise on them. Self-respect means knowing what you bring to the table and refusing to beg for a seat. It means walking away when you are not valued and holding yourself to a level of dignity that no one can shake. When you have self-respect, you do not tolerate being treated as an afterthought. You do not beg for someone's time or attention because you know that your presence is a privilege, not a right. People notice this. When they see that you are not desperate for their approval, they become more intrigued. It is human nature to want what is not easily available, and the moment you stop seeking validation from others, they begin to realize how valuable you truly are. A person who respects themselves does not allow inconsistency, half-hearted effort, or disrespect. They do not entertain those who play games with their emotions. Instead, they set clear boundaries, and when those boundaries are crossed, they do not engage in endless discussions trying to justify their worth. They simply walk away, knowing that anyone who truly values them will not put them in a position to question their own importance. Self-respect is the foundation of confidence, and confidence is irresistible. When you know your worth, you move differently. You do not try to prove yourself because you already know what you bring to the table. You do not tolerate crumbs of attention because you understand that you deserve the full meal. And most importantly, you do not allow anyone to dictate your happiness because your sense of self comes from within, not from external validation. Many people fear that standing firm in their self-respect will push others away, but in reality, it does the opposite. It filters out those who were never truly invested in you and draws in those who appreciate and admire your strength. The right people are not intimidated by self-respect. They are inspired by it. They see it as a sign of maturity, emotional stability, and a deep understanding of one's own worth. When someone encounters a person with true self-respect, they are forced to meet them at their level or step aside. There is no middle ground. They cannot manipulate, breadcrumb, or keep them as an option because a self-respecting individual does not tolerate such behavior. This often leads to a shift in dynamics where the other person realizes that they must either rise to the occasion or risk losing something truly valuable. The beauty of self-respect is that it is not dependent on anyone else. It does not fluctuate based on whether someone stays or leaves. It remains intact, unwavering, and undeniable. And when you operate from that place of inner strength, you naturally command a level of respect that cannot be ignored. People will test your boundaries. They will see how much you are willing to tolerate. But the moment you show them that you refuse to settle for less than you deserve, they take notice. Some may step up, realizing they underestimated your worth. Others may walk away, unable to meet your standards. Either way, you win, because you never compromise on yourself. At the core of attraction is respect, and at the core of respect is self-respect. When you hold yourself in high regard, you do not have to convince anyone of your value. They feel it, they see it in the way you carry yourself, in the way you refuse to engage in games, and in the way you prioritize yourself without hesitation. Self-respect is what makes people take you seriously. It is what separates you from those who are willing to accept whatever is given to them. It is what makes people realize that you are not just another option. You are the standard. Distance creates desire. This is a fundamental truth in human nature. People often fail to appreciate what is readily available, but the moment something becomes scarce or out of reach, they begin to crave it. This principle applies to many aspects of life, but it is especially powerful in relationships. When you are always present, always accessible, and always giving, there is no space for the other person to feel your absence. But the moment you pull back, when you create distance with grace rather than bitterness, you allow them the opportunity to realize what they may be losing. Desire is fueled by longing. When something is too easy to obtain, it loses its appeal. This is why people often take for granted the ones who are always there, always responding, always making the effort. The comfort of knowing someone will always be available diminishes the urgency to appreciate them. But when that dynamic shifts, when you remove your constant presence, that comfort is replaced by uncertainty. And in that uncertainty, the other person begins to think about you in ways they never did before. The absence of your presence forces reflection. When you are always around, the other person does not have to think about what life would be like without you. They do not question your value because they assume your presence is a given. When you step back, when you stop initiating conversations, stop overextending yourself, stop making them a priority when they are not treating you the same way, they start to notice the void. Suddenly, they realize the warmth, the support, and the energy you brought into their life. They start to compare how they felt when you were there versus how they feel now that you are not. Distance does not mean playing games or using manipulation. It is about understanding the power of space. When you withdraw, it should not be with the intention of making someone chase you, but rather with the purpose of valuing yourself enough to not force a connection. It is about giving the other person the room to come to their own conclusions, rather than pushing them to see your worth. Realization is far more powerful when it comes naturally rather than when it is demanded. People often resist the idea of creating distance because they fear losing the connection entirely. But if someone truly values you, space will not push them away, it will pull them closer. If they are meant to be in your life, your absence will be felt so strongly that they will take action to bring you back. And if they do not, then they were never fully invested in the first place. Either way, you gain clarity. You either strengthen the connection by allowing them to appreciate you more, or you free yourself from someone who was never willing to match your energy. Desire thrives in mystery. When you are always available, when you always say yes, when you never give the other person a moment to miss you, there is no intrigue. But when you create space, you also create curiosity. What are you doing? Why are you not reaching out? Have you moved on? Are you happier without them? These are the questions that naturally arise when someone who once had unlimited access to you suddenly finds that access limited. And in those moments of curiosity, they begin to remember what made you special in the first place. This does not mean you should withhold affection or play hard to get in an artificial way. It means that you should live your life fully, independently, and without basing your happiness on whether someone is giving you attention. When you are busy building yourself, chasing your own goals, and surrounding yourself with people who genuinely appreciate you, your energy shifts. That shift is felt. When someone realizes that you are no longer revolving around them, they begin to wonder if they ever truly had you in the first place. Distance allows people to reassess their feelings. When emotions are always at the surface, it is easy to get caught up in habits and routines. But when there is a pause, when there is space, it forces them to ask themselves real questions. Do they truly miss you, or were they just used to you being there? Were they taking you for granted without realizing it? Did they underestimate the impact you had on their life? These realizations do not come when you are constantly in their presence. They come when you are no longer around to remind them. Many people believe that by staying close, by continuously proving their worth, they can secure someone's affection. But love, respect, and appreciation are not things that can be forced. They must come naturally. And sometimes the only way for someone to see your value is for them to experience what life feels like without you in it. If your presence was meaningful, your absence will be unforgettable. Emotional control is strength. In a world where people act on impulse, where reactions are immediate and emotions often dictate decisions, the ability to remain composed is a rare and powerful skill. When you resist the urge to seek validation, to over-explain yourself, or to let someone else's actions determine your emotional state, you show that your happiness and self-worth are independent of anyone else's behavior. This is not about suppressing emotions, but about mastering them, about choosing how and when you express yourself rather than allowing circumstances or other people to dictate your reactions. When you control your emotions, you control the situation. Many people assume that expressing their feelings immediately and intensely will make them heard and understood, but often It does the opposite. When someone pulls away, becomes distant, or treats you with indifference, an emotional reaction, whether anger, sadness, or desperation, only reinforces their power in the situation. It shows that their actions have the ability to destabilize you. But when you remain calm, when you choose silence over pleading, when you walk away with grace instead of lashing out, you send a different message. You show that their actions do not control you. People are naturally drawn to those who can handle their emotions with strength and dignity. Emotional control is attractive because it signals security, confidence, and self-respect. No one wants to be around someone who is constantly reactive, unpredictable, or emotionally dependent. But someone who remains composed, who does not beg for attention, who does not crumble under rejection, that person becomes intriguing. The less reactive you are, the more mysterious and compelling you become. There is a difference between feeling emotions and letting them control you. You can acknowledge your disappointment, your frustration, or your pain without acting on it immediately. The ability to pause, to reflect before responding, gives you power over any situation. When you react emotionally, you give away that power. You become easy to manipulate because your emotions are driving your actions rather than your logic and self-respect. But when you take a step back, when you choose your response carefully, you shift the dynamic. One of the most powerful things you can do is refuse to engage in emotional battles that drain your energy. Not everything requires a reaction. Not every provocation deserves a response. Sometimes silence is the loudest answer. When you refuse to be dragged into unnecessary drama, when you do not give in to the need to explain, defend, or justify yourself, you show strength that is impossible to ignore. It makes people reconsider their actions because they can no longer control you through emotional manipulation. Mastering emotional control also means understanding that not everything is about you. When someone acts out, becomes distant, or is unkind, it often has more to do with them than with you. Reacting emotionally assumes that their behavior is a direct reflection of your worth. But in reality, it is a reflection of their own struggles, insecurities, and internal conflicts. When you internalize this, you stop taking things personally. You stop letting other people's moods dictate your own. And in doing so, you become unshakable. This strength does not mean you are emotionless. It does not mean you do not feel pain, disappointment, or love. It simply means that you choose how to express those emotions rather than letting them control you. When you can love deeply but still walk away when you are not valued, when you can be hurt but not let that pain define you, when you can desire someone but never need them, that is true power. People remember those who are in control of themselves. They respect those who do not let emotions turn them into someone desperate or reactive. When you maintain your dignity in all situations, you leave a lasting impression. The person who remains calm and collected, who does not chase, who does not beg for attention, is the person who is missed when they are gone. Because their presence was never dependent on insecurity or need. It was a choice. And when someone realizes they have lost the choice to be in your life, that is when they begin to understand what they had. Emotional control is not just about how others perceive you, it is about how you perceive yourself. It is about knowing that you are strong enough to handle any situation without losing yourself in the process. It is about recognizing that no one else has the power to dictate your happiness unless you allow them to. And when you embody this strength, you not only command respect, but you also cultivate a deep sense of inner peace that no external situation can